High fly ball into right field. She is gone. In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened. This one by Mattingly. Oh, hang on to the roof. Goodbye, home run. Don Mattingly. Taco makes one. Deep left field. Down the line. That ball is out of here. Out of here.
And here he is on the precipice of history. 3-1 Mets, bottom three. 2 outs, runner at first. Strider out of the stretch deals. Swinging a line drive, deep right center field, out toward that wall. It is gone! A missile into right center field, a 2-run home run, and history. Number 253 for Pete Alonso, all alone as the franchise leader in home runs. And listen to this crowd, everybody on their feet. Brandon Nimmo with a hug at home plate. The Mets have come out of the dugout, clapping, cheering, a hug with McNeil. Pete lifts his helmet, holds it up to the crowd. He knows how big this moment is, and he wanted to do it at home. He's done it.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Tablesetters covering all things Major League Baseball. As always, I'm Steve, joined by my tag partner, Devin. What's going on, man?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 116 here. Steve, it's been about 10 days without baseball here. I already missed it. Hearing a call like that makes me miss it a little bit more.
Having withdrawals for sure, and we have all the storylines in the offseason to keep us company in this long winter, but nothing like the fresh dawn of spring. But we are very happy to welcome Keith back to our show. Keith Raad, we're going to start off by congratulating you. You and your wife recently welcomed your second child to the world. How is everybody doing so far? You mentioned being busy. House may be a mess, but things are probably hectic on your end, right?
Yeah, Devin, Steve, good to see you. Nice intro. I got taken back to that moment where I think everybody in the booth thought that ball was going to hit off the wall and then disappeared. And you can hear my voice. Oh, bleep, that ball's gone. The Pete Alonso home run. But yeah, that takes me back. I'm missing baseball too at this point, even though it's worth doing this at 9 o'clock. You know, she ate at 8 and she'll eat at 11 and then 2 and then 5. And, you know, my wife and I are back in the trenches with our brand new baby girl, Phoebe. So we have Charlotte, we have Phoebe. I am surrounded on all sides by women. So pray for me. Pray for me.
Well, man, it's so great to have you back on here. If you guys saw our episode 37, it's the first time since he's been on here. So we're going to break down one of the more fascinating off seasons in Mets history. If you guys are unfamiliar, Keith is the radio play-by-play voice of the New York Mets on WCBS 880, where he partners with Pat McCarthy and Mets Hall of Famer Howie Rose to deliver moments like we just witnessed before Pete Alonso. So before we get into all the Mets action, Keith, all the conversation that we were here to talk about, we have to really digest. We've had 10 days, as Devin mentioned, to talk about that 2025 World Series. Just very briefly, give us your thoughts on what we saw and the electricity that happened between Toronto and LA.
Yeah, I think it was amazing. I think as a baseball fan, of course, you watch the Mets, you find yourself rooting for the Mets every single night, but to sit there unbiased and just love the game, and you know, Toronto takes the lead and it's like, okay, let's see if LA can come back, and then LA takes the lead and it's like, all right, let's see if Toronto can come back. And every game was amazing. Game 7, I'm still, I listen to podcasts, people talking about it. I'm still reliving plays and the kind of Falefa play at home, Rojas going deep in the 9th, Ohtani was going to hit. I mean, there's so, like, the Blue Jays were so close to winning it all. The Dodgers were so close to losing it all. And just a series filled with memories. And it actually got me more recharged for the season coming up than I thought. Usually at the end of the year, you're kind of gassed. But that kind of got me going like, wow, what to be in those moments again would be amazing.
That World Series was a roller coaster, much like the Mets season, in a different way, in a shorter span. But since you last joined us, this Mets team has lived through a full-scale drama, 45-24 start that had them pacing the league through mid-June, then a stunning 38-55 finish that cost them a postseason berth. From your perspective in the booth watching this, how would you describe that swing? The energy of their early dominance compared with the tension and fatigue of those final months. And what do you think it revealed about the team overall?
Yeah, I mean, just looking back, they were rolling. I mean, the beginning of the season was okay. You know, 2024 was not a fluke. I mean, they were building something. They built some momentum. They had confidence. And I was kind of nervous about them beginning the year because, okay, now all of a sudden you have a target on your back, right? You go to the NLCS, you play the Dodgers, you think you're all high and mighty, you just sign Juan Soto. Sometimes you might see a flat start when all eyes are on you, but it was the opposite of that. Offense got off to a slow start. Pitching, though, was incredible. I mean, leading the league in ERA. Defense was fine behind them. And then everything changed for me, and it turns out for the Mets on June 12th when Kodai Senga was injured, trying to cover first base on the Pete Alonso flip. I remember him tumbling in the grass, and it was this weird feeling of, especially once the game ended, the Mets won, but like at what cost? And then that kind of snowballed. I mean, he went down, Griffin Canning went down. So, okay, who's coming next? Frankie Montas fell on his face. Sean Manaea was nowhere near what we thought. And then all of a sudden it's like, who's going to pitch these innings? You know, who are you going to rely on? And then I think little by little, as we digested the season, you hear the big term that David Stearns has used is run prevention. It may affect Pete Alonso's future. And truly, when you look back and go, look at all those dudes that were in the room offensively and some good guys out of the bullpen, they went 83-79. Like there were a lot more problems maybe under the surface, like run prevention than we might have noticed. But I think the Senga injury was kind of the beginning of, something's really wrong here. And they obviously never recovered from that because that was the delineation point of 21 games over to not 21 games over.
So when you pop the hood open, I mean, the late season stretch was statistically wild, and Devin and I were confirming these stats prior to going on. They had 3 separate 7-game losing streaks, a franchise record of 46 pitchers used, and the team going 0 for 70 when trailing after the 8th inning, the only club in MLB to do so. So obviously those statistics are not going to add up to a playoff berth. As you mentioned, some things are more than just the bullpen, more than just the pitching staff. Felt like there was a couple of things that need to be fixed. But inside the clubhouse, how do you feel the players managed to keep things together through all of that? And what stood out to you for Carlos Mendoza's leadership style during this stretch of adversity? Because I felt like he kept the team together from watching from the outside.
Yeah, he did. He did. There's no doubt about Carlos's leadership. And again, we've only seen 2 years of him, but 2 really topsy-turvy years, right? The first year, terrible start, amazing finish, and then amazing start, bad finish. And the thing that stood out about Carlos in 24 was same guy, right? Same guy on a good day, same guy on a bad day. And that's what you need in baseball is a consistent personality to kind of lead you through. You don't want to ride the roller coaster emotionally with the wins and the losses. And they just never pulled themselves out of it at all. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they just maybe weren't that good as a team. I think that revealed the truth about them. I mean, I remember at the beginning of the year, like you talked about, of course, this year, 25, we're talking about 2 different years here, but David Stearns saying, our ERA is really low. I don't expect it to be this low, but I don't think anyone expected it to then pendulum swing kind of the other way. They never really found a middle ground. They never found any consistency, and the losses just continued to pile up. And I think at the end of the day, pitching crushed them, and they just could not find anybody reliable. And that ended up kind of being the thing that sunk the ship. But I don't think it had anything to do with mentality, which is the frustrating part because baseball is cruel. It's hard. That's why, like I said, consistent personality is big, and they just did not get the results. I mean, I find myself saying what Carlos says, but it's true. I mean, they just didn't win games, and they had the guys that they thought could do it, but maybe overall not so much. And I think it did reveal a lot of issues about player acquisitions. I think, talk about Carlos. I think David Stearns had a tougher year in 25 than Carlos Mendoza did. I think there's no doubt about that. Some acquisitions didn't work out, and that's on the person who brings in those players. Doesn't mean he can't bounce back in 26, but I think the team had some issues in 2025 that went beyond, the manager.
So obviously missing the postseason was just a huge disappointment and honestly a surprise to all baseball fans, not just Met fans. If you had to pin it down on one thing, I mean, I feel like you've alluded to it, but I want you to put your stamp on it here. What's the one biggest reason you think they failed to make the playoffs?
Starting pitching. Starting pitching is, to me, the thing. I mean, I know, run defense and hitting with runners in scoring position, but I said it at the trade deadline. Not that anyone was listening to me, but I said, these bullpen arms are great. Like, you need a starter. You need someone consistent that could give you some length. I mean, I know that, looking out on the horizon for free agents, the one thing that stands out to me as someone who watches this team and, pencil in whoever's going to start that night and think, okay, this guy's probably going to give you 5, maybe 6. the person that is undervalued is the Jose Quintana, the Chris Bassett, the boring 30 starts, 6 innings. It's not pretty, but it just gets it done. And that kind of guy was missing this year. That would stabilize you for, once a week or twice a week to get your bullpen back online, or maybe once in a while would pop and go 8 innings or so, but he would always give you 6 or something like that. So I think that was missing. Who knows if that person was out there at the deadline, but I think with the young pitchers that they have with McLean and Tong and Sproat, you never know what you're going to get from that. Who in the world knows what Kodai Senga is going to be this year? I think there's so many, there's a high ceiling and a high floor, but you need something in the middle there, some consistency with starting pitching. David Peterson was that guy and then totally faded. So he wasn't that guy. You need somebody who's a little bit more of a steady Eddie and could be super boring, but will give you that consistent outing.
So it seems like we know what's going to be in the cupboard for the Mets with Clay Holmes, Sean Manaea, Nolan McLean, David Peterson, as you mentioned, Kodai Senga, maybe Christian Scott. I guess we would have to see where Jonah Tong and Brandon Sproat start. Maybe it's AAA if they're still here. We'll talk about that in a little bit. There are the useful free agents as well. You mentioned some of the kind of the undercurrent of maybe these reclamation projects, but do you think there is a shot percentage-wise, Ranger Suarez, Zach Gallen, Dylan Cease, Michael King, Framber Valdez? David Stern does not like to spend on these free agent pitchers, at least the big ones. He seems to prefer those reclamation projects like we mentioned, but do you think any of those names make him change his mind, or do you think he's going to stay fast as what he usually does?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Like I think in 24, he looked like a genius, right? With Severino and Manaea and reclamation projects. 25 was almost heading that way, where they didn't turn Griffin Canning into Corbin Burns, but they were like kind of doing that. And then he got hurt and then everything fell apart. But so I do think they will find a reclamation project here and there. But I really do think this year they may make a splash in a sense, like maybe not a top of the market arm like Ranger Suarez, who's at the peak of his powers, but I've always liked a guy like Zach Gallen, who is, again, you look at his year by year, and maybe there's the fluke year in there, but there's your 30 starts, there's your 3.75 ERA. Like that's what Severino did in 2024 and Manaea did in 2024. That's the kind of guy that could help you, and he wouldn't be that expensive, in my opinion, because he's not at the peak of his powers. He didn't have a great year, and so he's a reclamation project in a sense. He may not be the guy that you go out and give 7 or 8 years to because he hasn't, he had a bad year, he had a bad walk year. So maybe that's a guy that does fit in a shorter deal, or a deal that is loaded with some opt-outs or something like that. But I do think, and I hope that, the playoffs and the Dodgers showed that once it's time to turn it on, you kind of need some stars to get you there. And who knows how motivated David is to show everybody that he's really good at this with reclamation projects, or maybe he throws in somebody who's, a reliable top of the rotation arm.
So I did breeze past the names, but I want to show some love to a lot of the hype that goes in with McLean, Tong, and Sproat. That trio has a lot of Met fans really excited. From your perspective, your evaluation on them, do you agree with a lot of the Mets fandom that these three could eventually be top of the rotation arms, whether here or elsewhere, if they're dealt somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, Nolan McLean was the real deal. I mean, the results were there, right? The ERA was low, the strikeouts were there, but the swing and miss stuff from guys that he would face was just laughable. I mean, it was that first start against Seattle where Randy Arozarena is swinging at wiffle ball pitches in the other batter's box. Like, wow, this kid's throwing stuff that big league hitters who have been around forever just have not ever seen before, with sweepers and curveballs, the way he spins it. So love him. Think he's phenomenal. It's just, you have this in the back of your mind. This is just from watching games and years, and don't get hurt. It's like one of those things, like you're going to get hurt at some point in your career. You just hope it's not soon. But that's because they have so much promise. Jonah Tong, I think, good flashes. I just don't think he was totally ready, and that's not on him. That's just where the Mets were at the end of the year. Could be there. I think he needs to, I'm just going to sound like a pitching coach here, but I think he needs to add a little bit of an extra weapon. With, the fastball curveball got a little repetitive against teams that were not insanely amazing. Like the Cincinnati Reds took him deep, I think 3 times in that start, just because he didn't quite have enough in the arsenal. Sproat, though, I don't think we saw enough from him. I like the poise. I think he can be really good. It was so hard to compare them to what McLean was doing because he was so good. I think both Tong and Sproat will be, 2s, high 3s at least, maybe 1s because they're still so young. I'd like them to stay. I think they will stay. I might hate to say that, but that's just what the Mets need they said it over and over and over again. We need to keep and produce young pitching because, like I said, they needed to start at the deadline. They weren't out there, or they were high price points. That's why you have to build from within.
And if they don't end up staying, the Tong and Sproat, and maybe even McLean, it would most likely be because there is some kind of dream scenario in a trade out there. And I think the dream for many fans is Tarek Skubal. Ken Rosenthal said it flatly on Foul Territory a few days ago. The Mets would be the obvious team for Skubal, is what he said. They need starting pitching. They have the young arms to include in a deal. It just makes sense. I'm guessing he would most likely cost 2 of our 3 young stud pitchers we just talked about and more. Do you buy into the rumors that the Mets will be involved here if Skubal truly is available?
Yeah, I think they'll make the calls. I think they'll look at it. I love watching Detroit in the playoffs. I mean, regular season, of course, but Detroit in the playoffs. Like, he's just somebody that you have that nobody else can come close to. Like, he's a real bona fide bleep you, if you don't mind me using the phrase, ace, right? They just give him the ball, he's going to shove. And I love that. I know the Mets needed somebody like that. I don't know if they're going to go all in for 1 guaranteed year of Skubal, and I think Skubal is a Boris guy, so Scott's not going to let them sign an extension. So it's going to be really costly. I know the Mets. I had heard they called in on Alcantara in Miami at the deadline, but the price tag was ridiculous. Like, I think David even said it. Like, would you want me to get rid of 5 good guys for this one player? Like, maybe, but is the juice worth the squeeze? I don't know, because I love those young pitchers. Depends on who's in the deal, but I mean, to have Skubal wearing a Mets uniform would just be a great feeling every 4 or 5 days if you're watching the team.
Yeah, and that's the difference between, I think some fans think of the Crochet deal to the Red Sox last year, where he was willing to talk extension immediately, and they got that done. But it is a little scary with Skubal. 99%, like you said, not going to do that as a Boris guy. Seems like he absolutely wants to make it to free agency, which would be, plenty of teams involved, all the big teams, whether it be Dodgers, Yankees, Mets. So that's a tough one. You think of Soto going for the Yankees for 1 year and then leaving. Tucker probably leaving the Cubs, it sounds like, after 1 year. So it reminds you of that a little bit. And just to follow up, you mentioned Sandy Alcantara during the season as a possibility. He's another possibility this offseason, I'm guessing. And there's other guys out there, pretty big names, the Sonny Grays of the world, Joe Ryan, Mackenzie Gore, Freddie Peralta have been mentioned as trade candidates. Do any of those names sound like realistic possibilities to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think like Freddie Peralta is an interesting one because of the way Milwaukee is built. Again, when you're making deals to bring in players, you're going to give up something painful, right? That's what we're talking about with Skubal. But you look at the different situations of a player like Freddie Peralta and a team like Milwaukee that gets to a point where they can only negotiate so hard, they're just not going to be able to come to the table financially. And so you might be able to give up a little bit less to get somebody like Freddie Peralta, where Detroit may surprise everybody and give Skubal a huge deal. And so you might have to budge a little bit more for those guys. But I would be shocked if the Nationals give up Mackenzie Gore. I mean, if they give up a guy like Gore, who do you have for this rebuild, kind of thing. But anybody like that in a trade, I think is really unique to come help, because you're not spending free agent dollars. And I know we haven't really seen David make that huge trade. We've obviously seen him sign the big free agent, but seeing a big, huge trade, I do wonder what his price tags are, because I've heard from scouts that say, hey, the Mets view their own prospect list way higher than we do. So they're trying to, crank up the value on a lot of these players that may not be there from other teams. That's just negotiation. But I'd love any of those names, because those names mean reliability, as you're talking about, Devin. Like, that's one thing that was, like I said, totally missing from the 2025 team.
I mean, it's not unheard of too, but there is sort of that tax you're paying in division with the Marlins and the Nats that I'm sure they're going to be like, well, we're going to charge you a little bit extra for that. Right. And I think that price tag at the deadline was steep for a lot of people. The Joe Ryan price tag that we saw, and I'd have to imagine in these dimly lit rooms, candle lit, whatever you want to say, at these winter meetings, it's going to be a little bit less of a price because there's not as much urgency for these teams that want to take that next step. And I think that a Joe Ryan makes sense for the Twins to go and move, but the price has to be right because you got to convince your fan base to come to the ballpark as well. That's the thing.
Yeah. And again, if you're trading Nolan McLean, who everybody wants to be excited about somebody. Like everybody loves Pete Alonso in 2019, and they love him every single year throughout because he's someone that you can hitch your wagon to. He makes you happy. He makes you a fan. You need that as well. And so it's nice to ship out young pitchers or young players for certain things or certain teas, I should say. But I think a guy like Nolan McLean, if you ship him out, he's built up enough equity in the 1 month of starts that you better get it right because he's the future Zach Wheeler or Matt Harvey or Jacob deGrom kind of guy.
So you mentioned Pete, and of course we will talk about him, but there are rumors out there that the Mets are wanting to, first of all, trade Jeff McNeil and maybe let Pete go unless he takes a team-friendly deal. David Stearns appeared at the GM meetings today. Really can't kind of give neutral answers being asked by all the MLB writers and all the press over there. But the rumors really allude to the Mets wanting to change this clubhouse culture. We kind of see that thread through all these conversations, articles being dropped. There have been rumors about clubhouse issues for years now, never proven, nothing there. Is there something that you buy into at all? Or is that just the New York media making something out of nothing?
Yeah, I've never been a Pete's toxic, Pete's a bad guy. That is, I mean, I'd be shocked if that was the case because of who he is. I mean, I will never disclose. We travel with the team, so we're on the plane, we're on the buses. I would never disclose anything that happens in those arenas because it's personal. I'm lucky to be traveling with the team as a member of the radio team, but even in those moments, just being around, there's nothing to that. There's nothing to those rumors. I've never seen anything like that. He's beloved by everybody that has been around him. So yeah, I'd squash that immediately. I remember when something popped up in 2023 saying to Buck Showalter, who was managing at the time, like, hey, there's some stuff going around that I'm not going to ask you about it because on our pregame radio, because I don't see it. So I'm not going to make up something to go along with it. To me, it's a non-story. And if they don't bring him back, I think zero has to do with who he is in the clubhouse to the teammates.
Yeah, I mean, we completely agree with that as well. Seeing it from the outside looking in, there's something to when a team is losing that people tend to make stories that kind of fit the narrative. And Devin and I use the term, and it sounds cliche, but winning is the best deodorant for everything. Obviously, personalities kind of blend a little bit better when you're cashing in those W's. So I think the Pete thing is more of it has to make sense financially and also on the field constructively as for where he fits. And if Pete wants to go get paid and go, play somewhere else, it's going to be more of that than more of he doesn't fit with the Mets culture, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think most Met fans after last year's free agency with Pete, when it was bring Pete back or bust, like I think most of the fan base kind of looked and said, what would life be like without him? And I think this year is so much different, right? I mean, just most Met fans, I think more this year than last year would say, I don't know if he comes back, where last year was like, they'd be dumb not to bring him back. So I definitely think that the mood has changed a little bit, where people are just kind of seeing it for what it is instead of through, rose-colored glasses about, Pete is a great Met and we love him. Like there are some warts when you look closely at his defensive game. And it's a tough one because you're paying for not the years that happened, but the years that are coming up. And that's a very, very difficult storyline.
That's the interesting difference. Like last offseason when we talked to you in early November, he kind of had limped into his free agency after a disappointing 2024. This time around, a year older, but absolutely wonderful season. Reestablished himself, 38 home runs, 272 average, 871 OPS, 141 WRC plus. Any way you want to look at it, he was great with runners on, right, in clutch situations. He broke Darryl Strawberry's franchise home run record. What's your read on the market for him overall? Not just the Mets looking at him, but everyone in Major League Baseball looking at Pete Alonso as a free agent.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to look at that offensive season. They're going to look at the career that he's had, and they're going to see exactly what we all see, which is the power, which is the fear. But they're also going to look at the position that he plays. I mean, he just doesn't hit. He plays defense. And I know that fans hate the analytics and hate the numbers, but the market will tell you that Pete is not a good defensive first baseman. He is actually one of the worst, if not the worst, defensive first baseman, according to Fangraphs defensive WAR, defensive runs saved, outs above average. Like, these are all things that usually add or subtract to your win total because of defense. But Pete is also either the number 1 or number 2 offensive first baseman. So if you're the Mets, we have the top offensive first baseman, and we could bring him in. He's also the worst defensive first baseman. That's the facts. How do you handle that? And I know he makes nice scoops in the dirt, but it's more than that. It's range. It's get into balls that, I mean, we all watch the World Series, right? Vladdy Jr. was getting the balls at first base that are big time great plays. Some of those are otherworldly. Those are plays a first baseman make, right? They get to those balls, and Pete doesn't get to those balls as often. And so a ball down the line that gets by him turns into a double, where some of the guys are converting that into outs. And over the course of a season, yeah, you have a great offense, great offensive season, but you finish 83-79. Like, that's one of those, under the surface type things that adds up. So Pete's a good first baseman, maybe a future DH. I don't think he sees himself as a DH. I think the market might say, hey, you might be more of a DH, but Pete's too proud to be a DH, and I think he deserves to fight for himself at first base. He works his butt off to be good over there defensively. Just look at the metrics this year, the last few years. It's just not the case. Even though offensively, you're right, Devin had a marvelous, beautiful offensive season.
And that goes into something David Stearns talks about all the time, and you mentioned it before, run prevention. In his post-mortem press conference, right after the regular season, he used that term a bunch of times. He also said something along the lines of, like, we might need to keep an open mind when it comes to our position players. This could mean so many different things, which I think is what drives fans nuts, because everyone just wants to know what's going to happen. And truth is, David Stearns might not know exactly what's going to happen right now, but could, in your opinion, do you think that means more of bringing Pete back as a full-time DH, or maybe wanting to move Juan Soto to first base eventually and freeing it up for him, trading some of the young position players, trading someone we'd never expect? What's your best guess here?
Yeah, I think a lot of it stems from, and I urge, if you're a fan and maybe you don't like Fangraphs or the numbers on defense, but some of the players that we love that make offensive plays, right? Brandon Nimmo, great offensive moments, not a great center fielder, so they move him to left field. In left field, not a great left fielder, right? And like, you have a not great left fielder. Juan Soto is in the Pete Alonso bucket, where he is the best offensive right fielder in the game, but also the worst defensive right fielder in the game. I mean, that team, again, 83-79, like, you have to make some changes. So maybe Nimmo is your lefty DH and Pete's your righty DH. Maybe. I don't know the answer to that. And you get a better glove in left, and you maybe win some more games while keeping some of those familiar faces around. The Soto move to first would be so crazy to me, because I just think when you have a prize free agent like that, who's just in the beginning of his career, the prime years of his career, I should say, not that you're punting on a few things, but you're I don't know. I just think it would be a give up, in a sense, even in Juan's case, to convert to first base. I mean, Bryce Harper did a great job with that. He's a terrific first baseman for the Phillies, but I don't think it's too early yet on Juan to switch to first base. But yeah, I think they could get creative with positions. I don't think they know quite yet what that means, but that could mean we view Pete as a DH. We want him. We value him as a DH. We don't value him as much as a first baseman. Take it or leave it kind of thing. You mentioned that it's going to be on the Mets' terms, him coming back. I think that's true. But I think defensively, being creative with, a guy like Brandon Nimmo, what do you do with him? You want to win games. No, David, everyone is on David this year for having a poor. No, David Stearns does not want the Mets to lose games. Like, he wants them to win games. He's trying to do his best to be creative with some of these long contracts that are on the books. And I think that those are some of the ways that we might see into spring training. Guys grabbing maybe different gloves, guys maybe not grabbing gloves at all. We'll see.
So, I mean, there's conversation about the rotation, but we turn our focus towards the bullpen here, and the spotlight shines on Edwin Diaz, who returned back to elite form, 1.63 ERA, 28 for 31 in saves, 98 strikeouts, and 66 and a third. Given David Stearns' history of avoiding those oversized contracts and looking in the bargain bin sometimes for reclamation, we've seen him avoid oversized reliever contracts. Do you think Diaz becomes that rare exception because of his value and what we've seen from him, not only between the lines, but as a symbol of energy at Citi Field every ninth inning? We know what he brings as far as closing it down and being reliable. When he's there, he's electric.
Yeah, and I think this is a little bit tougher than Pete in a sense because of all the things that you mentioned. I mean, the trumpets, right? That's like a marketing, that's perfect, right? Every Met sales ticket person wants to send their sponsor, hey, look at this moment, buy your tickets and buy your sponsorship. And Edwin has been a great story as a Met, right? Terrible start. I mean, it's amazing in Seattle, comes over, struggles in New York, is amazing after really early struggles. But I was surprised in a sense that he opted out because I don't know how much relievers are going to get in the open market. And he had, 2 more years left, right around $19 million or so, which is a lot of money. I mean, you saw Josh Hader sign a huge deal and then got hurt. Talk about Milwaukee, and they traded away Devin Williams. They had a kid named Abner Uribe come in, throwing 101 miles an hour. No one ever heard of, like getting some big outs for them. But the Diaz one is so interesting because, are you going to pay all that money? Would you rather them give that to a starting pitcher or give it to Edwin Diaz? I mean, not that, the Mets are pinching pennies, but you have to allocate resources. You don't have an unlimited budget. I really don't know what they do with Edwin. I know he's been a great Met. He loves it. He's a good teammate. He's just a beast. I really, you can tell I have no answer on this one because I'd love for them to bring him back, but the reliever market, I mean, Tanner Scott last year got a ton of money and was hurt in the most important game. So you just don't want a big contract like that to hamper you to make the team better in other places.
And I think for the bullpens too, when we all watch a lot of baseball, that sometimes they are just that. They're a crapshoot, to roll the dice sometimes. And there are these exceptions, of course. Edwin Diaz has been more of the exception than a lot of these relievers, but you're right. Tanner Scott, the other relievers that have gotten money, sometimes it doesn't always turn out like you want it to. But with that being said, we have to feel like the Dodgers are lurking there. Maybe the Yankees could be lurking too, trying to make things right as far as they go. What do you think for the Mets is their backup plan? Do you think that they just try some of these young kids that throw hard, maybe try some things out in spring training? That's, as you mentioned, kind of works in Milwaukee when you're able to have, they have their spotlight and there are passionate fans there, but it's a little bit easier to do that at the back end of games and just expect, because that's almost their MO, their plan, replace whoever's there, whether it's Hader or Devin Williams, next man up type mentality. I don't feel like the Mets had that in the first big game that's blown in April. You have people calling into the fan. People are going to be very upset. Closer is a very important thing in New York. It's everywhere, but New York is certainly a bigger spotlight.
And Steve, I think one of the best cases for Edwin Diaz to get a nice big contract with the Mets is a guy like Ryan Helsley, right? Comes in, beast, St. Louis, former NL reliever of the year, can't pitch in New York, or just couldn't figure it out how to pitch in New York. And so you need it's a different stomach to pitch the ninth inning. The fact that Edwin has proven it in New York is big. And even though he may be costly, you need those guys to win big games late in the season, of course, late in games. I mean, the Mets added so many late inning guys at the deadline. Like the Yankees traded for every closer that ever lived right at the deadline, like with Bednar and Doval. And so everyone's looking for that guy that has the stomach for it. And Edwin's proven that. It's just, is he going to, knowing that he is Edwin Diaz and the trumpets, and is he going to, hold them for ransom here and take everything? Or I don't know. It's interesting, but you need somebody like that to close it out, especially the way David has his team built with these 5-inning starters that are just going to keep you in the game. You need that bullpen to be good to win that game that is close. You have to spend it somewhere, right? So spend it starting, spend it relieving. You got to spend it somewhere for the pitching.
So before we get too far away from him, we kind of talked about his defense, but Juan Soto, how do you assess his first year in Queens, first of many? An MVP candidate, but no playoff appearance for the team. Kind of a weird situation there. And has his presence in the locker room in the clubhouse kind of shifted the Mets' identity at all?
Yeah, I mean, he's a stud. I mean, there were times this year, it was June, August, where he just was so on, it was ridiculous, some of the contact that he made. And you just want more. The problem is, when he came in as the second coming of Babe Ruth, right? Or Ted Williams, and the man can do no wrong, and every at bat he's in it. The truth of the matter is, like, he's a human being. Like, he's not in every at bat. We just came in with such insane expectations that he's going to get a hit every time or hit a home run every time. I think he is the real deal. I don't think I've ever seen anybody. I mean, he's was the youngest ever with the amount of home runs and walks that he's had by age 27, better than Jimmy Fox, better than Mickey Mantle. Like, the amount of times he gets on base is so insanely valuable. You understand why people were shelling out a ton of money for him. But yeah, there were moments where it didn't come through with men in scoring position. There's no doubt about that. That's a lot of first year big contract issues, if you will, but MVP finalist. You wouldn't want anybody up, I don't think, in a spot late in the game. I mean, that Pete Alonso probably, but with Juan Soto, you'd want up. And I think it's just the beginning of a great career with the Mets. He's definitely not wants to be the captain. He doesn't want to be the leader, the face of the franchise in the clubhouse after the game. I think that's Francisco Lindor's spot, Brandon Nimmo's spot. But that's okay. He's a quiet guy, just kind of feeling it out. Probably a really funky year for him to walk into a clubhouse, players, people, media, who's real, who's not, who's a fraud, who's phony, who's fake, kind of thing. And then I think he'll get more comfortable as this year too. I think is going to be really, really big for him to maybe do even more.
When we spoke with you last year, it was about a month, maybe a little more than a month before Soto ended up signing with the Mets. We had asked you, of course, about the possibility of the Mets signing him. I found your answer really interesting at the time because it was just different from what everyone else was saying. Everyone else was just kind of talking about the money part of it. You had said, of course, they should be interested as long as they thought Soto and Lindor would get along well together or be able to kind of share that spotlight together. So after a year, how do you feel about that duo together?
Yeah, that's a good answer by me, I guess, last year. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of that was a big part of the calculus. But I think there were times this year where it seemed like Juan was not a great teammate early in the season. Someone would hit a home run, he's on base, and he'd be nowhere near home plate or the on-deck circle, like high-fiving. It was like, that was kind of strange. And it just so happened that it was somebody ahead of him in the lineup, like Lindor. I think they were filling each other out this year. They don't have to be the greatest of friends. I don't think that's a prerequisite to be successful. I think Steve said it before, like, winning cures all. The thing about this, they respect each other. I don't think they're best friends. They don't have to be. Everybody in that clubhouse, this is not, a team that's in a minor market. Like, everybody in that clubhouse is a brand. They are all worth millions of dollars. They all have PR people. They all have their own personal sponsorships. It's just different. It's not a little league team where we're all friends going out for ice cream and we all have school tomorrow, same class, doing our homework together. But as long as they get along, as long as they're playing hard, I think that that they'll get better with their relationship. But also, I mean, I'm not sitting back there in the cages with them chatting. It just was plainly obvious that they weren't bear hugging each other every 2 seconds in the dugout. They don't have to be. They really don't have to be.
So before we move too far from Juan Soto, we will talk about some more conversations with him, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about just the series against the Yankees. From my perspective, it seems like he was genuinely surprised about the visceral reaction he got from the Bronx. Did you get that vibe from him, that just seeing him? Because he seems surprised that people were as mad as they were. And I mean, Devin and I spent a significant amount of time on here talking about me from the Yankee perspective, him from the Met perspective. It was pretty wild to see. And I think Juan Soto was taken aback by it.
Yeah, that was interesting because he didn't, I mean, hard for anyone to handle that. I don't think he handled it great. He was kind of jokey and laughing and, smiling a bunch. I remember there were two moments, Carlos Rodon and Clark Schmidt, I think two guys that pitched for the Yankees in that series. And like, he comes up to the plate, he smiles at him, right? Like old teammates. And then I think both guys like brushed him back with something. And, Juan like smiled, but Clark Schmidt wasn't smiling. Carlos Rodon wasn't smiling. It was like, it's game on here. But it was also weird. Like, Juan knew everybody was looking at him. Is he going to do the ESPN Sunday night mic'd up interview? Like, it was just like, get this thing over with. I do not want to be here anymore. I think, next year when the Mets go to Yankee Stadium, if he hears the same hate, I think he'll treat it totally different. It's just kind of a weird thing that he thought he could like smile through it and joke, but he didn't really have a great series. That series, even Yankee fans were like waiting for the home run. It just never happened.
Yeah, and most team-centered interviews talking about players and all those things with a broadcast, we're not going to include a question about a first base coach, but because of what we saw from Juan Soto and what he brought to his game this year, this has to be different. Antoine Richardson was fantastic for the Mets last year. Juan Soto publicly credited Richardson for his unexpected stolen base total. Now we watch him taking up ship in Atlanta with the pitching coach, Jeremy Hefner. How big a deal is that for those two to be a part of the Braves organization right now and kind of add what they brought to the Mets over there?
I think I don't even remember her name from Friends, but the Chandler lady. Oh my God. That was my reaction, was just, I looked at my phone. My jaw dropped. I'm like, of course they did. First of all, Jeremy Hefner is the man. Antoine Richardson is the man. They're both great guys, great coaches. So I wish them the best, and I told them as much when they got the jobs, because we're going to now see them 4 times a year. Antoine, I was very surprised about that one in a sense, where they didn't come to terms. I'm sure Antoine knew, hey, maybe I can ask for a little bit extra because I turned Juan Soto into almost a 40-40 man. The thing I liked about Antoine, and I think Juan liked about Antoine, was Juan Soto comes in, big contract. You'd be surprised at how many people just kind of want to stay away from him. Antoine got like right in Juan's face, kind of told him what was up. I don't care who you are, we're going to work. And Juan loved that. He loved the little pushback from Antoine, the playfulness. And Antoine got so much out of him. He could read pitchers so well. He read pitchers so well that even Carlos Mendoza would say, hey, I think so-and-so on our team, I don't want to say the pitcher, I don't want to get it wrong, but say it was David Peterson, is he tipping? Can you watch video? Like, that's how valuable he was. So I'm surprised they didn't come to terms to bring him back. But I think the Mets know that he's going to be a problem in the NL East. Maybe Ronald Acuna steals 400 bases this year because of it. Hopefully not many against the Mets, but Antoine was amazing. I think with Hef was here for a long time. The results just really weren't there. I mean, the last few years, walks were high, hit by pitches were high. Some of those things that were key, just maybe time to get a new voice in there. So I'm happy that, Jeremy, I knew Jeremy was going to get a job somewhere. Again, I didn't think it would be with Atlanta. They'll be fine he'll be fine with the Braves. They'll work well. He'll do some really good things, but I just think it was time for maybe a new voice in the Mets clubhouse. I understood that somebody's got to fall on the sword. Is the manager? Is it the front office? The players? Turned out it was the coaches, and it just happens when you don't get results.
So let's talk about center field a little bit. Center field's been kind of a black hole when it comes to offense for the Mets the last couple of years. Pretty good defense out there. I mean, Tyrone Taylor is absolutely fantastic. Harrison Bader, when he was here, great. Jose Siri, the little bit that he actually played, obviously a really good defender. But offensively, I mean, last year, center fielders combined hit just 210, slugged 314, only drove in 47 runs combined. Just today, David Stearns told reporters that Carson Benj will get a shot or get a look in spring training to win the job. Tell us why Met fans should be excited about Benj. And do you think this comment from Stearns means they won't pursue center field help in free agency or possibly trades?
Yeah, David Stearns loves Carson Benj. I kind of picked up on that last year when he had the kid flying through the minor league system, and you could just tell the way he talked about him was different than just promoting a good player. Like, they think he's got it. And he's a different cat. I think he's a little bit, I'm not going to say off the wall, but he's not your prototypical, like Drew Gilbert, animal guy. He's just like so focused on being really good at baseball, Carson Benj. But I think it's way too much pressure to say, he's going to be the starting center fielder. I think that's a bad way of doing business. But you might see, if they like, of course, they want to bring Tyrone Taylor back. Tyrone is guaranteed borderline Gold Glove level center field defense. So you've got that part. Maybe you see more of an offensive center field pickup in free agency. I don't know who that might be, but Yeah, I mean, some of those numbers that you rolled out, like there was no doubt that Cedric Mullins was just. I mean, I'm still shocked at how poor of a year or end of the year he had after the trade. Like shocked at what that turned out to be, because that. I mean, how many at bats did he come up with men on and just didn't happen for him, and that Mets lose out by a game, and that's what it felt like. But yeah, I mean, Benj, that's part of David's one of his first drafts, right? The people that he put in position to run the draft, to run scouting, to run the minor league system, and this kid's flying through. And it's kind of like, hey, here's what we did. Let's get him up there to show that we know what we're doing with our first round pick. And I'm excited to see the kid play because truly I didn't see him enough watching the Mets every day. But when you fly like that all the way up to AAA, it's for a reason. It's pretty impressive.
So there's some younger players that have been here for a bit now. The jury still seems to be out on guys like Ronnie Mauricio, who is the future third baseman. You seemed excited about him last time we spoke. Mark Vientos flashed big time in 2024. We know his struggles are pretty notable last year. Brett Beatty probably flashed the most in 2025 out of all those guys. Maybe Acuna seems to be just a defensive replacement and a pinch runner after we saw him buzz when he first got called up. A year later, similar to how we're buzzing about Benj now, how should we feel about the guys that have been here now that we're still trying to assess what they are for this team in the future?
Yeah, I think Brett took a major leap forward. I mean, he was really a good, complete package as far as like gave you an offensive impact, gave you a great defensive impact. I think he's made such strides in his defensive game, plays in, plays back, taking control, getting that double play started, that good accurate throw to second that kind of was plaguing him the beginning. So I think if you bring him back for third base, you're in a good spot. I think he's figured a few things out. Maybe they add a little supplemental help there too. They're not going to go out and get Alex Bregman, I don't think, to play third base. They might. I don't know. But I don't know if we're going to see Brett turn into a wild superstar like an Alex Bregman. I think we've seen enough from Brett that he's good. Can he be really good? I don't know if he's going to be great or all-star level. Could be. Ronnie, had a weird year. I mean, they threw him in there coming back from the injury and never felt like he had enough time to get comfortable, and he was playing meaningful games. So I think a nice offseason will help him. I think good spring training will help him. I still believe in him. I just think he had a mentally strange year. And then Mark's really a unique one because talk about defensive metrics and numbers. He was very, very bad at third base defensively. Offensively, obviously, was searching. A lot of people think he brought his offense onto the field, and that's why he struggled defensively. But if he's part of the picture, I don't think he's a huge part of the roster. I think he's out of options. So even if you were to trade him and that team, ended up DFAing him, like that team didn't get much out of that position. So I wonder what they do with Mark. And they're not going to give up on him. That bat there's too much potential in there. But yeah, this class, if you will, of third baseman getting a little old. We're seeing more and more of them. We're waiting for somebody to just, be really, really, really good consistently. And I think maybe Beatty was third on that list and now is all of a sudden number one. So it constantly changes every single year.
Well, talking about another third baseman similar to Vientos, but much better defensively, David Wright, one of the most emotional days of the year was July 19th. He got his number 5 retired, inducted in the Mets Hall of Fame. What did that night that day represent for the organization and for fans who've lived through every era of Mets baseball?
Yeah, that was so special. I mean, just, I love working with Howie Rose, right? But it's such a look into the past in a sense with Howie. He knows the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and some, parts of the 90s. Well, he knows all about the 90s, but you know what I mean? He brings those Mets teams to life, and to hear the stories, even of Darryl and Doc, right? But when number 5 went up there, didn't it feel like our generation was like, right, we got one. Piazza's up there, obviously, but
yeah,
David was, the 2010s and his career you just felt like you grew up with him, and to see him up there, it felt like part of you was, getting retired. So I thought it was really meaningful for us. And I actually talked about that with Howie, and he said that he felt the same way when Seaver went up there, and he had his accolades. Player he grew up watching and loving and wanting to be, and then calling his career, and then at the end of the career getting the accolades. And that's how I felt about David. I mean, I grew up watching this player. You grew up wanting to be this player at third base and Little League, and seeing his career and the sad and terrible ending to what could have been one of the greatest careers in baseball history, in New York baseball history even. And when you meet David Wright, which I've been lucky to do, just doing this job, I'll pop in the booth and he's like, I know this is obvious, but he smiles, and it's like the Wiz in Seinfeld, if you get that reference. I'm talking about the 90s, like just like ba-ding, like wow, superstar. And he's the greatest guy. Loves to rib you with some jokes too, and get under your skin with some things. But it was such a great day for the organization. I think a great day for just a generation of Mets fans that, this day to me was a long time coming. It was 2025. His last game was 2018. I know that's probably about the right time, but let's go here, and so it's good to get it done.
I can say that's 100% what it felt like for me, as far as it could, just like, one of ours that we were with there at that time, watching every single game, every single inning. And it kind of brought me back to a time and place, like what I was doing at the time that David Wright had some of those big moments. It's really cool to see. But a lot of fans and pundits alike had predicted the Mets would have maybe David Wright pass the captaincy off to Francisco Lindor. Ultimately, that did not happen. Were you surprised that that hasn't happened at all yet? And do you think Lindor gets that C on his chest at some point?
Yeah, there was definitely a talking point in spring training, knowing that this was coming. I think once the season began and we were getting ready for David Wright Day, I know there's a lot of people that almost expected that on social media that morning, and I just it just wasn't going to happen. It was just focus was on David. I think the reason it hasn't happened yet is because guys like Brandon Nimmo are really important too to the clubhouse. And I know Francisco speaks after games probably the most, but Brandon's right there too. It's not going to come from Francisco going into Carlos's office saying, "Give me the C." It's got to be the entire team. And I know that a lot of, when things are going poorly and team meetings are called, and how do we get everybody together and have a team meal when we fly into a city, get everybody together. Like Nimmo's part of that too. Lindor is part of that. So I think I'm less bullish on Lindor actually getting the C than I was maybe a year ago. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think if you could do it like hockey, give a couple guys an A and maybe a C. But there's no doubt Lindor and Nimmo are the heart and soul leaders of the team. Maybe Lindor, obviously, performance based, a little bit more of an MVP candidate kind of thing, is more of a prototypical captain. But I think because he doesn't have the C yet, that's probably one of the reasons why.
So with David Wright, you mentioned before the unfortunate end to his career, injury short. And I think as a Yankee fan, comparisons to Don Mattingly happen to be there. And Don Mattingly is in vogue conversation wise because of things like we're at the point where the standards of the Hall of Fame are shifting. We've had the conversations on here, right, on episodes many times, and maybe eventually looking at the player's 5-year peak when deciding on, are they a Hall of Famer? How do you feel personally about that, about changing that landscape for Hall of Fame considerations? Because a guy like David Wright should be measured with that context in mind, because there was a time and place where he not only was one of the better third basemen in the league, but one of the better players, superstars in New York, and that should count for something. Yeah,
I'm with you, but I just think it's a sad ending of a career, and that's the sad part. I don't think it's a Hall of Fame. It was heading that way, but I just don't think that, like you said, the picture of the 5 best years. I get it. I don't really buy. There's always the but, right, with that. Like Joel Sherman talks about this all the time. Like it's the best of the best of the best. Like you can't have any buts or anything against it. He's like a very tough grader with this stuff. And I'm not as tough, but I don't think David is a Hall of Famer. I feel like such a schmuck for like saying that out loud, but because we love him, but it just, to me, like, just, I think everybody agrees that it was just, he was going that way. It was just so much meat left on the bone that the injuries were just devastating and heartbreaking. And you knew he was going to be one of the greatest players ever, but it just physically didn't happen for him.
Well, excuse the wrestling reference. It's like Shawn Michaels got his second run post 98 when he broke his back. If David Wright can come back and do something similar, but obviously baseball's a whole different animal.
I've never thought of that comparison, but now you have me hoping. But speaking of the Hall of Fame, this year's contemporary ballot came out, caused a lot of conversation recently. Some big names and ones that just feel more recent, I guess, to some of us. Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Carlos Delgado, Jeff Kent, Don Mattingly, Dale Murphy, Gary Sheffield, Fernando Valenzuela. Mets fans would obviously like to see Keith Hernandez's name on one of those ballots one of these days as soon as possible. But how do you feel about those names on the ballot this year?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, with, Bonds is always the asterisk is always going to be there. Delgado, I think, is an interesting case. But again, I think they all kind of just fall a bit short. Like, I think I always get flack that Ken Griffey Jr. had the sweetest swing ever. I think Gary Sheffield is pretty like 1A in my opinion. Like, maybe a little biased generationally because I watched a little bit more of Gary than Ken, just age-wise.
We've all mimicked that swing too, man. That's like everyone playing wiffle ball has done the shimmy and all that stuff.
Absolutely. So I think, and Gary's the only one that hit his 500th home run with the Mets, not 500 home runs, as a Met, but he hit his 500th with the Mets, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, like Keith, I know he's not on the list, but 11-time Gold Glove, 11 consecutive Gold Gloves. I think he's got a case if you want to love some defense. Talk about run prevention. I always like Heath's case for the Hall of Fame.
So, I mean, we'll see where that goes. There's obviously some voting that needs to happen down the line. And like you said, the Barry Bonds of the world of Roger Clemens, that conversation will continue because it's at this point, the younger fans that maybe don't take the steroid issue as serious are growing older. And it's becoming definitely a point of contention with the older fans. But baseball's popularity at this point is in such an amazing place right now. We watched the ratings for the World Series. Felt like everyone was buzzing. Water cooler talk. It helps that a whole country was rooting for a team, all of that. And as fans, we're all terrified of this lockout that's looming after the 2026 season. And I think it could be the worst thing for baseball. We saw what it did in 94, the climb out of the hole to get there, and full circle took steroids to get us out of it, I guess. But do you have any optimism when it comes to the owners and players avoiding a lockout, or are we going to wait to the last second to try to avoid missing out on the 2027 season?
Yeah, there was a huge point of huge conversation, like mealtime before games all year this year with writers that would come in for a series and everyone's very, very nervous about what baseball looks like in 27, what a lockout looks like. I love labor relations. I think they're so interesting. There's a great book if people are interested called Baseball Power Brokers by John Passat, which is a great look at the union, the players union, the owners, like what they want. I love that stuff. So I just know that the salary cap is going to be the biggest thing that owners push for, and that's the one thing that players never want to give up. From what I hear, again, I don't know any of this. I don't know a ton of it. I don't think the players, the last CBA, I think at the end, like the committee that thought that, hey, we're going to get all these things. The players who voted on it behind the scenes, like the massive players, like outvoted the committee, which shows a little weakness on the player side. So that may lean things toward the owner's way for that salary cap. But I think that's going to be the biggest topic is, okay, you want the Pirates and the Marlins to spend. Well, we have to, create a floor for that, but that means we also have to create a ceiling. And that's very anti what baseball is, right? You won't get the $765 million Juan Soto. But I don't know. I'm hoping to be optimistic, but we've seen this many times roll through seasons, roll through the first months. We lose spring training. And that's the worst thing was when you realize like this, the flowers are pushing through the snow. You want spring training baseball and it's just not happening. It's about as heartbreaking as it gets, right? Because you just want winter to end and baseball to begin. But it, from what I've heard, it could get a little messy.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the salary cap being the crux of the issue. We just saw the story break 3 days ago. Who knows if it's true? We obviously saw the story with Rob Manfred going clubhouse to clubhouse. Bryce Harper told him to get out of the clubhouse. And then recently there was a story that came out that he allegedly was threatened to, quote, end up in a ditch by an MLB deputy if he continues to have this conversation. So it shows how diametrically different people feel about this salary cap issue, that on both sides, that it wasn't really about the salary cap thing. It was about apparently how Bryce Harper spoke to Rob Manfred, et cetera, et cetera. But this obviously hyperbolic, clickbait, all that stuff we're talking about on this podcast. But point being is it's not going to get solved in 2 months, 3 weeks, whatever it takes. It's going to take a long time from now until we get to that point. And the clock is ticking. And baseball, like we said, to go back to we're all baseball fans. Baseball's in such an amazing place. We cannot afford to let any of these other momentum move in a different direction. It just feels to me like a do or die moment for the sport.
Yeah. And if you implement a salary cap, you probably can never take it back. Right. I mean, that changes what the sport looks like forever. And, baseball, basketball and football and hockey have them, but baseball is just so different in that way. It's very capitalistic, which is, a lot of what the country's based on. You want to make sure that you get every dollar for your performance and not be capped at all. I get that, but I find it interesting that, there are players out there, like when Ronald Acuna signs his contract and he makes $100 million, the union gets mad because he should have waited to get more, but he wants to make his $100 million. Like, he should be able to make his $100 million. So even amongst the players, there's a little bit of, I guess, distance in how they all view how they should be making their money. The top 1% get everything. And there's definitely a difference between the sport is skewing so much younger in clubhouses, right? Young players, cheap, controllable. So the guy's making $750,000 a year. But then there's also Juan Soto on the other side of the clubhouse making $765 million a year. And in the middle, those players are getting squeezed. How much pressure will those players put on the rest of the union to maybe say, you know what, maybe we do need a floor so that the rest of us can get paid, but not conversations that the three of us have to fight for. We just want baseball, right? We just want to save baseball.
I agree. I think there's a weight, like you mentioned, of all the generation of baseball players that came before. They don't want to be the generation of players that give in to this issue, even if some may agree that it could be for the betterment of the game. And there's that black cloud that hangs over where they don't want to be considered weak. But in the long-term health of the game, we watch the NBA thrive, the NFL, the NHL does the same thing, and players can still make generational wealth. It just won't be in the same scope. But we watch NBA players, they're making endorsements, and baseball players do the same thing. There's money to be made out there, especially if the sport is thriving. Yes. And just, I don't like to sit in my house when it's spring. I want baseball, guys. It's just clear as day. Let's just get the games going.
Absolutely. I mean, the Acuna example you mentioned is actually, it's really interesting to think of because $100 million signed really early on, and the union probably hates it, like you said. But think about his example. He's had 2 major knee injuries, 1 more, and he might not get a big contract. Like, he's still in good position right now because he's a ridiculous athlete. But like 1 more, and you might not see that. So there is something to be said about that. But as we come closer to the end of the show here, much lighter note, we follow you on Instagram, and during the season we noticed you go golfing pretty frequently when you're out on the road before games. So the big question here that everybody wants to know, what was your favorite place to golf this year?
Ooh, that's a good one. I mean, it's kind of sickening how often I would go. We played, well, I'm not going to remember the name of this club, but it's in Milwaukee. Name drop here. Brian Anderson, who is the nicest human being on planet Earth, right? Voice of the Brewers, does college basketball, does the NBA. Great guy. Had us come out to his place in Milwaukee, which was, top of the line, unbelievable. Like, when you hit a ball in the fairway, that divot, like, it was just like scrape the turf. The divot would go like as far as the ball. It was like, wow, this is pristine stuff. But I love traveling, of course, with the job and going to different cities. But I found out from the Phillies guys how to get this travel golf bag into the team plane overhead without having to bother the travel secretary to like put it underneath. And they're going, we're putting the radio guys' golf clubs on here. Like, I don't want to be that guy. I just want to like quietly put my clubs on. And it's funny, like, I'd pass through the players in the middle of the plane and they're like, gloves? Nice. How do you, where are you playing? How'd you shoot? So it's nice to like play in Chicago and playing San Diego and St. Louis and all these fun places where I have a lot of friends too that'll just play a quick 9 on a game day or 18 on an off day. But yeah, I got the bug bad this year, boys. Very bad.
According to Google, it looks like the Brown Deer Golf Course is the most popular in Milwaukee. Is that strike a chord with you? Is that the name we're looking at, or is that?
It is. It's out there, and I got to look it up. It's out there in the distance, and I'm also giving away exactly where Brian Anderson lives. I don't want to.
All right, well, we can leave that off then. It's okay. You don't have to give the specifics. But there's a lot of beautiful golf courses here on Long Island. I know Devin goes golfing all the time. That a lot of the Islander players talk about that as well when they're out here. It's part of the allure of Long Island, and also obviously in Queens as well. It's an extension, but. Keith, we so appreciate you coming on here with us, as always, giving us your time, especially when you're so busy with the newborn and all that stuff going on. Hope you're enjoying your off season, but we'll get you out in here in this. So we've chosen 4 moments that really encapsulate the Mets season. We're going to have you rank them, but the kick is here. We're going to have you do it blindly. So I'm going to list them 1 through 4. You tell me where you rank it. I'm going to start off with the moment that we talked about in the radio open. Pete Alonso breaks the all-time Mets home run record. You make the call. Where do you rank it 1 through 4?
Oh boy. I mean, pretty high. 2. I'm going 2.
Okay, 2.
All right, Devin, you keeping track over there?
Yeah, I got 2. Pete Alonso at number 2.
All right, our next list over here is David Wright's number is retired.
Okay, so I had a feeling this was on there. That's why I didn't want to put Pete number 1. David Wright, I think, for me, number 1 moment of the year.
All right, so we need to fill out 3 and 4 here. So we have the Mets radio team goes down to the Williamsport Hill.
Every Met fan was on the edge of their seat when they watched that. A big fat 4 for the Mets radio team.
All right, so we'll pick what you had for number 3 here, and it's Noel McLean shutting out the Phillies over 8 innings in just his 3rd major league start. So I think you did a pretty damn good job there.
Okay, yes, I'm sweating more than I was in the last hour and 6 minutes. So not bad.
Not bad. So David Wright, number 1, retirement. That makes sense. Pete Alonso's record-breaking home run, number 2. Nolan McLean, 8 shutout innings, number 3 over the Phillies. And then Mets radio team. You guys should give yourselves more credit going down the Williamsport Hill.
It was actually like we went down the hill and there was some people there from Pennsylvania and they're like, "You guys with the Mets?" Like, "Yeah." "Wait, who are you?" "Who are you?" Like, "Oh yeah, I'm Keith and Pat." "You're Keith and Pat," and they're like huge Mets fans living in Pennsylvania that listen to us on the Odyssey app, which
That's
was
so
really
funny.
cool. But yeah, they were just like, "Oh my God, you guys are in person?" Yeah. It was pretty cool.
Watching some of the players go down that hill, especially as a Met fan, like we know sometimes when things can go wrong, they will go wrong. I was holding my breath on a few of those, but luckily everyone came out unscathed.
Very surprised they let, I think Beatty did it. I think Vientos did it. I think McNeil did it. Yeah, I was very surprised they let anybody do it at all. It's pretty steep. It's pretty far. Yeah.
So you mentioned the Milwaukee golf course. Is there any chance that you'll find your way down Bernie Slide a little bit, or is that too far? Because we watched that. I think it was a Dodger beat writer that like tore his shoulder up doing that. Is that correct? Do I have that right?
Yeah. Then it was I'm gonna say it's one of their sideline guys a couple of years ago. Yeah, torn labrum, I think. I would love to get
hard
up there.
against the wall.
I would love to get up there and do that. Dev, where do you play on Long Island? Where do you play here?
Oh, I mean, well, first of all, I should say this. So I tore my Achilles the same day as Griffin Canning tore his Achilles. So I just got out for the first time maybe 2 weeks ago and tested it out. I'm like 4 months removed from surgery. So anyway, no one cares about that. But Stonebridge, we played. That's like, I believe it's like Smithtown. We play Sunken Meadows sometimes. A lot of the public courses. I live very close to the Bethpage courses, but it is always so hard to get a tee time there that it just kind of frustrates me. But we try to jump around to different spots. Timber Point down in Oakdale, kind of on the water is a decent spot if it's not too windy. So yeah, we bounce around.
Love that. Sorry about the Achilles. It's like an epidemic.
Terrible.
Everyone's Achilles is tearing.
100%.
Every sport, real life. Yeah.
Yeah,
terrible.
Don't know what's going on with that. I mean, Devin did it the same year as Tyrese Halliburton. Who else did it? We had
Jason Tatum, Dame Lillard.
Lillard did it too. Yeah,
couple football players.
And you're on that list now too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Everybody.
But I appreciate it, guys. I appreciate talking a little Mets baseball here in November. It's giving me the itch to get going again. That's why I'm lockout talk. I know this is for like the year after, but it's scary. I just want baseball back.
For sure. And we appreciate you so much for coming on here. If you guys go and check out everything that Keith is doing over there. Again, he's the voice of the New York Mets on WCBS 880, partners with Pat McCarthy, partner going down hills as well, and Mets Hall of Famer, of course, Howie Rose. Make sure you guys check out every pitch of next season. You can follow him on X at Keith_Raad, and check him out everywhere he goes and check out the broadcast. So Keith, we'll catch you next time. Hopefully it's not too far down the line. Hope you enjoy the offseason.
All right, boys. You too. Thanks so much.
All right. Once again, we want to thank Keith Raad for joining us here on episode talking about all things Mets offseason, very candid reaction to the season. You can tell that he's invested in every pitch. And like you said before, I hope we can make this an annual visit before the season starts. It almost is like our unofficial start to what is the baseball offseason.
Yeah, it's just interesting. I went back and tried to listen to a little bit of episode 37, which was our first episode with him around the same time last year. And like just comparing where the Mets were there like last year and where they are now. Questions both years, but last year, even though you're eliminated, you lose to the Dodgers in the NLCS, like a lot of good vibes and people pretty happy with what they just watched. You had all the Jose Iglesias stuff, obviously. Like it was a giant party. And he made a good point that like 2025 was basically 2024 in reverse. 2024, yeah, I got off to that miserable start, and then all of a sudden it was amazing the second half. And this year, it felt like the good vibes were going to continue. And he's right. It's hard to kind of draw that line of like when things went wrong. But I do remember that feeling that he said he had when Pete messes up the throw to Senga at first base. I remember Senga was amazing for a while this year. Like, we always do the sub-2 ERA crew for the first couple months of the season. Like, he was right up there every week. And to see him go tumbling down and get hurt, and it just felt like a sign of things to come, like something had just changed, and it had. So, and as far as the offseason goes, I mean, a lot of interesting answers from him. I thought his response to my question about what does David Stearns mean when he's talking about keeping an open mind with position players, the idea of like Nimmo not playing as much left, like having him DH against certain guys and then play left field half the time, and then Pete play first base half the time and DH the other half the time. They kind of split that DH. Like, not opposed to that if Pete's back here. So I thought that was an interesting one, but lots of a great insight from Keith, as always.
For sure. And I think the follow-up for our last episode, we had him on, you mentioned episode 37, last offseason. So much has changed since that point, but it seems like a lot of the themes have just grown itself. And it was interesting to go back on the Soto Lindor conversation. It was a nice pick by you out of the dirt, if I will, like Pete Alonso at first, to talk about that, because that was a big talking point in the offseason about some of the egos blending, whether ego not even being a bad thing, it's just personalities. And we have that every day in our own work. And I thought his answer was interesting because he really kind of said it's up in the air still. So we'll see how that evolves over time. But it was interesting to me that there's some emphasis that they're not buddy-buddy, not that we're expecting them to be, but it's certainly something to watch as a Met fan, because winning does cure all and people will become closer when they do win together. But it is interesting to see that it is still kind of a conversation going on in the subplot of what's going to happen in 2026.
Yeah, and I think we've just kind of figured like Soto's like a little bit of a, I don't want to say a loner, but I think he's very family aligned, and it's not so much friendships and like going out with the team and that kind of stuff. That's fine. Like, to everyone, to each their own. Like, if you knew someone like that in your real life, would you judge them for it? Probably not. Of course, baseball's an entertainment venue, so like we want to see the players be entertaining. And before Soto, the OMG year, the Mets were super entertaining, like in the dugout and all that stuff. And to Soto's credit, he like started getting involved in that more. I think he became aware maybe of, you know, some people's perceptions outside of it. And like Keith said, like year 2, man, like he should be more comfortable. And I mean, who knows? Maybe he has a bigger year. Let's just wait and see. Like, as he said, as much criticism as David Stearns gets, David Stearns doesn't want the Mets to lose baseball games. So he surely is motivated to turn this team around. We might not always agree with the way he goes about it, but you know, it's still very early in the offseason. So lots and lots to come here.
So we do appreciate you guys listening to the show. As Devin mentioned, we do have a lot of content planned for you guys throughout the offseason. So episodes will continue to drop sometimes once a week, maybe multiple times a week, depending on the guests we're able to secure. We're looking to expand our range of who we're having on this show. So stay tuned to social media, Tablesetters Pod on IG and on X. Continue to have the conversation. And we are not letting baseball disappear from our windshield. We're going to be continuing to talk about it. None of this is in the rearview mirror. We're going to look forward to it. We're going to be previewing the WBC. We're going to be talking about the hot stove. We're talking about the GM meetings. There's obviously this week a lot of focus on the awards. The Cy Young seems like it's sewn up in both the AL and the NL, but there's that contentious conversation about the AL MVP. what goes on with that. We will have our answer on Thursday. We'll see where the voters had gone to. Is it Cal Riley? Is it Aaron Judge? We'll see, and we'll break it down all for you on here next time we're on here. And we'll continue to cover all things off-season baseball. So, Devin, any final words before we get out of here?
No, I mean, if you're a Met fan that is tuning into this episode specifically to hear Keith talk about the Mets and you haven't really tuned into Tablesetters before, if you like what you heard, you like our style here, our most recent episode before this was a lot of fun, kind of previewing the hot stove free agency. We did a little bit of a free agency prediction draft where Steve and I are going head-to-head. And we'll kind of keep track of who gets the points there as the offseason goes on. So if you're looking for a little more of us and want to find out if this is a podcast that you want to tune into weekly or sometimes twice a week instead of just the episode of the Mets here, go back and listen to that one. I think that'll give you a good taste of the kind of stuff we try to do. We try to have as many different guests on here, but we also do a lot of episodes on our own and try to make them as entertaining as we possibly can. So thanks for tuning in, and hopefully you guys come back.
For sure. And on our way out the door, we're going to play the sweet sounds of Keith Raad calling that big moment with Pete Alonso, and we'll catch you next week. And as always, happy baseball.
And here he is on the precipice of history. 3-1 Mets, bottom 3. 2 outs, runner at first. Strider out of the stretch deals. Swinging a line drive, deep right center field, out toward that wall. It is gone! A missile into right center field, a 2-run home run, and history. Number 253 for Pete Alonso, all alone as the franchise leader in home runs. And listen to this crowd, everybody on their feet. Brandon Nimmo.
High fly ball into right field. She is gone. In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible